Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to Survive the Haunt. I'm your host, Austin, and glad to be back for another episode. Before we get started, I want to talk about some things that's been going on in my life, just some important things, keeping everybody in the loop. I've been trying to do some new things. I've picked up reading. Um, Me personally, it's been always been hard for me to read because I'm dyslexic. So in my trying to get rid of playing video games and doing stuff more productive, I've tried to pick up reading. And even though it's been a week, I can say that we have finished a book. Like I did it. I will come clean on it. I did cheat a little bit. I Here at the Lawrence Public Library in Lawrence, Kansas, I got a library card and I picked up a copy of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I also picked up an audiobook version of it. And to get me back into reading, I decided that what I wanted to do was to listen to the book but then follow along in or listen to the audiobook and follow along on book. And I really enjoyed it. And I did it kind of quickly, kind of put in perspective how much time I was putting towards something else instead of doing something fun like reading or just learning. And I finished it. I finished Dracula in about half of a week. First time in a long time I've been able to do something like that. And I just didn't stop there. Right now, while I couldn't get a physical copy of the book, I am currently about an hour away from finishing The Shining by Stephen King. I love the movie. Love the sequel, Doctor Sleep. It's probably one of my favorite movies of all time. I love me some Mike Flanagan, as some of you guys already know. But I decided to pick it up and give it a shot and give it a read. And I really like it. Since I'm only an hour away, I've picked my next book, what I'm going to read, and I'm going to take a step away from fiction books and I'm going to listen to Nick Offerman's book about his relationship with his wife, Megan Mullally. And of course, Ron Swanson, the man himself, and his wife both narrate it. So it's going to be really interesting, and I can't wait to dive deep. And hopefully by next week, we can talk about that, kind of turn this into a book club. I've made a goal for myself to try and read one book a week or one book a week, 100 books in a year. So, what else has been going on in my life? Not really much. Definitely been working on this, and I got some projects in the future that someday I'll be able to talk more about that I think will be exciting. So let's just get into it. This week I watched The Witch, or how it's spelled is the VVITCH. I absolutely love this movie. It might be one of my favorite movies of all time. Always loved it. I remember when it came out. It was in 2015. I was still in high school, and I don't think I saw it when it first came out. I think I waited till it went on to Netflix, and I saw it, and I absolutely loved it. Some background behind it and about it. This is the director debut for one of my favorite directors, Robert Eggers, and he came up with this idea growing up in, I think, Salem. I think he lived in Salem or in Massachusetts, and going to Salem a lot as a kid and just understand or just being fascinated with the witch trials and things like that. And of course, me when we read what's that book? The Crucible. When we read The Crucible in English, I just absolutely loved it. I always thought that this stuff was interesting. A lot of the lore that's established of witches, it has to deal with women being persecuted for seeking their own freedoms. And this movie talks about that a lot, and so does The Crucible. I took a history class one time at my last school. We talked about the Salem witch trials because it's just a famous American event. What I thought was interesting was that there's a map, and I'll try and find this picture of the map, and I can maybe post it to Instagram so you guys can see it. But there's a map of Salem, of the township, and it's marked on who lives where and who convicted who of being a witch. The map shows the people who live on the outside of the town that aren't as privileged as the others usually convicted someone of upper power to them of being a witch, and it's just a struggle of class. And I think it's interesting. Like I said, I'll try and find a picture of it and post it into Instagram so you guys can see it. But something about this movie that is important to know is you have to maybe you're probably gonna have to watch it with subtitles. It takes place, I think, 60 years, or it's rather 30 or 60. I know that's a big break, but takes place before the witchcraft trials of Salem. So it is old English. This is it's like old United States. Dialogue is heavy, hard to understand just because of how our modern dialect has changed since then. But it is absolutely beautiful. Listening to the characters speak of even the how do you do or good morning, instead of saying just good morning, they say stuff like, may God bless you with this great morning, or things like that. So I thought it was really interesting. It is hard to sometimes understand what the character is saying, so I recommend watching it with subtitles, especially because Ralph Phineas, or is it Ralph Phineas? Let me check. No, Ralph Ineson. Sorry, Ralph Phineas is somebody else. Ralph Ineson. Ralph Ineson has a thick Scottish English accent. He sounds like he's chewing on gravel, but it is so beautiful. Hearing his commanding and thunderous voice is amazing, and it adds a lot to the story. We can go here too. Main character is played by Anya Taylor-Joy. I think everyone by now should know who she is. If you don't know her by name, you'll look at her and go, "Oh, I've seen her." I think this is one of her first roles, and man, is she absolutely amazing. She kills it. Kate Dickey is also in this, and her and Ralph Ineson were both in Game of Thrones. Ineson was the Mountain or the Hound. I think the Hound. Kate Dickey is like Jon Snow's aunt. Catherine, who is like Jon Snow and Catherine Stark. It's her sister. So they both have real acting. Like they are capital A actors, and they bring it on screen. And even the children, down to every character's cast perfectly. It's just a good movie, and I cannot stress that enough. Something that I want to add to this thing in films. It's called the Bechdel test, also known as the sexy lamp test, or some other things like that. Since media in general is based towards men, and it's unfortunate that it is, but it truly is. This person in the 80s came up with this comic strip. There's this feminist strip about modern media. But here's the simple test. It's these three criteria, usually in this order. Some things change. I know there's a modern version of it now. But for a film to pass the Bechdel test, it's got to first have more than two characters, have the two characters talk to each other, and have the two characters talk about something other than a relationship. And those simple three things, think about when you watch a movie next time and look for those. If you have female characters, a lot of movies have females only be in it to be a relationship for the main character. I don't think that Benny Loves You from last week will pass the Bechdel test because Dawn really is only there to be a relationship or to have her own struggles, and I don't think it passes. But something else that we got to talk about before we get into this is the difference between terror and horror. For me, I absolutely love horror movies. It's my genre. It's what I want to work in. And clearly, if you're listening, so do you. There's a difference between terror and horror in movies. And I can describe this by when you're watching something scary and the music is starting to like raise and put you on edge, like as this person is walking towards the closet, and that feeling you have before they open the door, and that hesitation of being really scared, that's called terror. And then the opposite of that is when you finally open the door and a big boom comes and you get scared and then you're done. That's horror. That those two things are important to understand when you're going forward with watching these movies. And this movie, The Witch, is terrifying. It has terror throughout. It is a constant sense of what's happening, what's going to happen. Please don't do that. And then you just keep going. It keeps building, it keeps building, it keeps building until eventually it pays off. And it doesn't pay off in just like jump scares of interloud noise, jump. No, it's all earned, and it's this energy, this foreboding mood that is just present throughout the whole entire film that's super important. And that's what I really like about this movie. And the attention to detail is also really important to the film. And I think the setting itself acts as a character in the film, just like Anya Taylor Joy, Ralph Ines. It the setting, the woods is an actor, and it adds to the story. And even the setting itself is beautiful. So Robert Eggers prides himself on authenticity, and while making this film, he did these couple of things that I would love to be a part of a shoot that does this someday. Everything you see, this movie is really really dark subject matter, but then also just lighting. Everything you see is shot with natural light, meaning that they don't have a big light camera or a big light following the camera around, casting shadows or making so you can see your character. Instead, it's lit by candles on the table, the moon, the sun. So everything looks really gray, and it's just how it was when they filmed, and it adds to the setting. Even the house that they live in is period accurate. Eggers worked with historians to try and recreate the homes, and it really shows and it really adds to the story of understanding how isolated these people are, or just how life really sucked as of what it was like to be this person who all you did was wake up, get food so you don't starve, and in the meantime you pray to God in hopes that he doesn't spite you. Because it's also important to know that these are Puritans. These are people who fear a vengeful and violent and angry God, not a loving God. So they're constantly praying for, please don't send me into damnation. Please don't cast me into hell because I've done this human basic thing like I was mad at my siblings, so I yelled at them. It adds to the character of, or adds to the story of how sad it is to live during this time and how dangerous everything is, how fearful everything is. But enough talking. We just got to get right into the movie because it is, once again, if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend pause this podcast. It'll be here when you're back. Watch the movie for yourself because this is not a way to exchange seeing the movie. Watch it, think about it yourself, and then come back. I am not the voice of God about what this should be. Think about it for yourself. I highly recommend it. You can watch it on HBO Max. It's so important that you guys see this movie. So the movie begins with Thomason's family on trial in front of a court of individuals. This takes place in New England, so it's the church council, and we don't quite yet understand what's happening, but we find out that they are being called in front of the judge and the preacher to testify of why William, the father, the patriarch of the family, has not baptized his children in the church. William protests that it is not the way to do it. He believes that everyone is false Christians except for him. The family gets banished from the town. We get a shot of Thomason looking at the town as they ride away, never knowing that she'll probably never see them again. And she's just a kid. She's a young girl, but she's just a kid. And her whole life is about to change. So it's over this that we get a little montage. Once again, montage. We talked about that last week, where it's played by this music. And I would not say it is not good music. It is scary and also period accurate. We can take a little break right now to talk about this. In modern music, we play with this thing called chords or the rules of three. I don't know if it's actually called the rules of three, but that's how I've always been taught, where you create a melody based on three notes that are steps above, like a third above the other one. Everyone knows this like simple C chord on the piano. Back when this wasn't a thing. So when Robert Eggers commissioned music to be made for this, he specifically talked about he doesn't want any type of new music. He wants everything to be accurate to how it was. So there's no string instrument. It's these whining winds and these foreboding sounds, and that plays throughout the whole entire film and adds to this feeling of isolation and fear because that's all they fear where they are because at any moment they could die. So while the music is playing, we see that the family has found a place to land outside on the edge of the woods, and they've all on their knees and they're holding hands and they're thanking God for giving them this land because they are still religious. It's not like he doesn't believe. He just believes differently than everybody else. His faith will be present throughout the film, and it doesn't change, and it's really strict. And actually, to me, I feel like it's really oppressive. But we jump to some time later. I think it's like a year, probably less than a year. And we see that the family has grown since then. They've constructed a house, they have a barn, they have goats. They're really starting to take over. Might be a year, might be 2 years. They've planted crops. Like I said, they got goats, built a house, and Catherine, the mother, has given birth to another child named Sam. And I got a little ahead of myself. This whole scene does start with Thomason praying for forgiveness to God. And usually, when all these characters pray, they never pray in thanks, they pray in fear. So she's saying, God, please forgive me because I've lied to my parents. Please forgive me. I've not said my prayers at night. Don't send me to hell because of these things. Give me mercy. And it's really sad and oppressive, and it's her once again living in fear of doing basic human things of sometimes you just forget. It's just life. But back then, at any moment you die and you be cast to hell for doing something really small, and it's just so oppressive. But then after some time, we see that Thomason leaves the house and goes outside and is tasked with taking care of her brother Sam. Thomason and Sam go out to the outside of their house into a field and playing peekaboo. And Thomason's laughing, Sam's laughing. It's really, really cute. And we get a shot of Thomason where she's covering her eyes and going, boo. She covers her eyes and goes, boo. And she covers her eyes. And when she removes her eyes, her face goes from a smile and it goes flat. Then we see a reverse shot to see that Sam is gone. In the time that it took her to cover her eyes and release her eyes, Sam has been taken. We then get a shot of a woman carrying Sam as she runs through the woods, and the music begins to play, and it gets louder and louder. So then the woman enters her house and has Sam laying out on a table, and she rubs something on Sam and then grabs a knife. We don't see it, but it is intended that she has killed Sam, mashed him up, and has rubbed his remains on her. And it's really sad. It's really out of nowhere. And this is like the first 6 minutes of the film. And it really sets the mood for what's going to happen. This cold open is one of the best that I've ever seen. And it's really, really sad because even though we just met this kid, we see the pain that we can understand the pain that everyone's going to feel because he's gone and he's so innocent. And this woman, this witch, has taken him and done this. But not only does she cover herself, we get a scene where she quickly covers a stick with his remains as well. And this is also where I can say where they use natural light. You can't see anything. When they built the shack, they had all these things of importance, of time, of what someone would need to live alone, and just all these realistic things, but you can't see anything because it's so dark. It doesn't matter how bright you're watching it or if you're watching the dark, you just can't see it because the light's not casting, and it shows how realistic it is, and the attention to detail is amazing. But the woman goes outside, she mounts a stick like a broom, and she begins to float up in the air. And as the music begins to get louder and louder and louder into a crescendo, we see that this woman is floating above the trees and begins to like take the shape of what I'll say like a crow sitting on a branch. Okay, so we cut to a week later, and Catherine, the mother, is crying. She cried herself all through night, and we get to meet the young brother, Caleb, who's like the second oldest. And he gets up, he gets ready, and we see that Thomason, Caleb, and their other siblings, the twins, are all laying on this upstairs attic thing on these mats. Nothing looks comfortable. But we see that while Caleb's getting ready, Thomason's blouse has opened up just a little bit, and you can see her womanhood just a little bit. And him being a boy who's isolated looks at it and is filled with shame. And it's not like there's anything sexual there, but he's just doing a basic human thing that everyone has done, and he's filled with such shame, and that shame will follow him forever and will be brought back up, and it'll come back. It just shows that these children would experience these things in the town, and they're experiencing these regular human emotions, these regular things alone in the woods with only their family, and that adds to the shame and it adds to the guilt of becoming human, becoming grown. So Caleb gets up and he walks outside and he meets his father, which this is the second time we hear his voice. And this is when I thought that he was just chewing on gravel because I could not understand what he was saying. It was beautiful and I was hypnotized, but couldn't make out what he was trying to say. And Caleb is talking to William, the father, and they decide that the corn is bad. The corn is not taking, it's all rotten. And to survive, they need to go out and they need go into the woods and hunt, which something that's Caleb. Caleb's scared of that because in his mind, something from the woods took his brother. So they decide that they have to wake up, they have to go out into the woods. William says to Sam, "We will conquer the woods, it will not destroy us," which is everything he said leading up to that was beautiful, understanding that the perseverance that is required to live out here. And it's absolutely beautiful to hear this dad console his son while not telling him, "Hey, it's okay." He's saying, "We have to do this. This is what life is." It's really sad because this boy really needs help. He needs somebody to talk to. So then we cut back inside and we see that Thomason wakes up and Catherine is in bed. The mother is just in bed. She's praying. She prayed all night long. She didn't sleep at all. And Catherine's praying for God to show her that he still loves her. She's saying things like, "Prove to me that I have not done wrong and that you're not punishing me for what I've done." And it's just this woman praying to God because she feels like God doesn't love her. And it's once again sad. So then we cut back to Caleb and William. They're walking through the woods. Caleb is reciting prayer, and then they have a conversation about original sin. And Caleb begins to worry that since Sam wasn't baptized, and neither was Caleb, that he will be in hell when he dies. And William tries to console Caleb and tells him that he hopes that he isn't. He doesn't like tell him, "No, I know for a fact he isn't." He says, "That's not for me to tell. So stop thinking about it." And it's so sad. Absolutely sad. So this is when we start to understand why William is who he is. William has issues with pride. He holds on to his pride. That is his sin. And even in this time, William cannot say, "It is my fault that we are here. If we were still in town, Caleb or Sam would still be alive." And Caleb is pleading to his dad, "Dad, what are we to do?" And having William be so prideful, he's saying, "We're supposed to be here, kind of just man up," instead of admitting, "Hey, yeah, this is scary. This is wrong." So it's just once again, this proves who William is, and he won't come to the truth that realistically of the time, it is his fault that his kid and his children and his family are going to go through these things because he decided not to just do the simple act of baptize these kids into the church. And for that, he casts them into this danger. So after that, we get a scene where William tells Caleb that he sold his wife, which is Catherine's silver cup, for traps. And William makes Caleb promise not to tell his mom that that's what he did with it. So then after they talk with that, William and Caleb come across a rabbit that's just in the field. And William takes out his gun, tries to take a shot at him, and when he fires, the sparks go into his eye and the shots miss, the rabbit runs off. We then cut to the two twins, which is Mercy and I forget the other boy's name is Mercy and something. But they're skipping, holding hands, they're singing a song that they made up about a black goat named Black Phillip. So Jonas and Mercy they're singing Black Phillip, a crown grows on his head. Black Phillip, to Nanny Queed is wed. Jump to the fence post running in the stall. Black Phillip, king of all. And they sing that over and over again, which the subtext of that is they're singing that this goat, which in I think all of us know in popular myth, Satan himself is shown as a he goat or a he got, which that's where that word comes from, which is a male goat. So William and Caleb return to the house and they see that the goat is out. So William wrestles Philip back into his pen, and in doing so, he falls over. Catherine comes out and is like, Don't you kids know not to play with that? And she turns to Thomas and said, you were supposed to be in charge of watching them. How could you let this happen? And Thomason said, I just looked away for a moment. They're gone, and they were gone. I can't control them. They're too wild. But Catherine isn't listening. She punishes Thomason by making her wash her father's clothes. Then we get a scene where Thomason is removing her father's clothes. Nothing is sexual about this, but we get a shot where Catherine is looking at Thomason and this whole thing and is quietly jealous of this intimate moment that usually should be shared between a husband and a wife, but is now the daughter's duty to take care of the man. But since she's of age, it possibly makes Catherine feel like she's aged out and she's getting too old and he no longer loves her. Because this is her whole story. She cannot let go of jealousy. So while Catherine and Thomason are fighting, Thomason leaves to go wash the clothes, and then Catherine and William are fighting about where have you been? I've been working all day. You need to tell me what you're doing. And then Caleb tells Catherine, his mother, we were just in the woods. We were in the valley looking for apples. We didn't want to tell you where we were because we wanted to surprise you. And we didn't find any apples, so we're sorry. And she turns to Caleb and says, I don't need no apples. I need you. Promise me you won't go out to go look for these silly things. And this shows that Catherine has love for Caleb and the other siblings, but while might love, in quotes, love Thomason, she's treating her unfair, and that continues throughout the film. William goes and he starts to chop wood, and this will be his like coping mechanism because he could have stood up to Catherine and said, "Me and the boy were out. We're just doing stuff. Let us be." But he just lets her be mad at everybody for doing something silly, which they didn't even do. So then we get a scene where Thomas is washing clothes by the river, and Caleb shows up to fill up a bucket of water for the mom. And Caleb once again gets a shot to see that Thomason's blouse is opened up just a little bit, and he's looking as a boy would do, and when she looks up, he looks away with shock and with shame. Thomason invites over Caleb and they talk about things they used to do when they were in England, and Caleb shows us that he loves his sister. He might be the only person who he'll do anything for her. He loves his family. But while the two are talking, they get interrupted. One of the female twin, Mercy, sneaks up on them and she's saying, I be the witch in the wood. I took Sam and I flew, just things like that, just saying that over and over again. And Thomason is so sick of her bullshit, she decides to scare Mercy and say, You're not the witch of the wood. I be the witch of the wood. I take Sam. I be the wolf that smother him, just things like that. And she begins to get scared. And Thomason scares Mercy basically to death, where she's like crying, she's screaming. She says, If you tell mother about this, I will curse thee. And cut in between this, Mercy talks to Thomason saying, Black Phillip told me that you are a witch. He told us the truth. We understand now that the children have this fascination with Black Phillip. So after Mercy runs off, Thomason is frustrated that no one is treating her fair. Even Caleb at this point walks up to her and says, Why would you do that? Or how dare you do that to her? And she says, What's the point? Why is that important? No one believes me anyways. And it's just a sad moment of her breaking down and being frustrated with her life because she's being blamed for this thing that she is also feeling. And people are treating her like she doesn't feel these same sadness that everyone else does with the loss of Sam. Because just like I would feel so bad where I couldn't even describe it. I lost my brother into the woods and he is dead, and I couldn't do anything. Just feeling so powerless is so sad. So then after that, we cut to the family eating dinner at night, and it begins with William praying. He's once again asking for salvation, asking for forgiveness. Instead of like, thank you for this food, he says stuff like, thank you for this food and thank you for not punishing us for the actions we've done. You've offered us this grace to eat, and we thank thee for it. So it's like another oppressive feeling of hatred that they feel God has for them. But it's during this time too where Catherine looks at Thomason and says, "Where's my cup?" Which is the cup that William sold to get traps and things like that. And then Thomas says, I don't know. Did you look here?" And she said, "Of course I looked there. What did you do with my cup?" So the two start arguing. Thomason is pleading her innocence, which we know she is of, until Catherine turns to her and says, "Did a wolf take my cup as well?" And that like really drops a bomb on the table. We see that that really hurts Thomason. And we see that during this time, William is just letting it happen. He's letting his wife talk down to his daughter when he knows that he took the cup. But he's so prideful that he doesn't feel like he needs to be the one. All he says is, "She said she didn't take it," instead of saying, "I took your cup." He is letting her get the blunt of this. And Caleb's there too, looking at her, at his dad, saying, "You took the cup. Why are you letting her treat her like this? Tell her you took the cup." And just no one does anything. And it's another sad scene. So then we cut to later that night, and Catherine and William are in bed, and they're just got done praying. William turns to Catherine and says, "It's important to me that you sleep tonight. Stop praying over these things," and kind of like a, "Hey, move on," which is really sad. But Catherine says that they're cursed, that William cursed them by not allowing them to get baptized, and it's all his fault. And when someone tells William something like this, he breaks down. He thinks himself so justified that he's like, "It is not my fault. Don't say that." So then they come up with an idea that since Thomason is old enough to be married and she's coming into her womanhood, that tomorrow William will take Thomason into town and trade her for some food, which is, of course, a really sad thing that happened at the time, that a woman's worth is what they can offer to a family instead of being of value themselves. But then we get a shot that shows that all the kids are awake. While they're talking downstairs about sending Thomason away, the twins are up. Thomason is up. She has a face of shock and sadness that her mom's kicking her out. And we see that Caleb looks at Thomason and closes his eyes. Then we cut to the next morning, and we see that Caleb has gotten up early in the morning to try and go out and find food. Because if he goes out, if he's the man of the family and he goes out to find food, there's no reason to get rid of Thomason. She could stay and be a part of the family. So he's trying to take care of his sister when his parents aren't doing that. But of course, Caleb's a kid. He's scared. So Catherine. So Thomason comes out and finds Caleb hitching the horse and convinces him, "Take me with you. I can help you, take me with you." And he gives in and he allows it. So then we get a scene where they're riding through the woods. They brought their dog Fowler with them, and they're discussing things that happened in England. They're talking about, "Do you remember having windows in the home? Do you remember the apples? Do you remember these kids?" And Caleb says, "No, I don't remember. I was too young." And Thomason's like, "Of course you remember. You remember this? You remember all these things?" And they get interrupted by Fowler. He starts barking. And we see that there's a rabbit. The same rabbit from earlier is in the field. The dog runs after it. The rabbit runs off. Caleb runs after the dog, and the horse rears up, knocking Thomason off and knocking her out. So then we see that Caleb is lost. He's walking through the woods alone, and after some time of walking, he comes across a shack in the wood where a woman exits the shack, the same shack from earlier. And this time she's a beautiful woman. She's looking seductive, wearing red, and she walks over to Caleb and kisses him. And as she kisses him, another hand comes up, and it's like this gross, grotesque old hand, and we cut to black. So during this time, we get a shot of the family calling for Thomason and Caleb. They're right outside. They're walking around the property, screaming for them to come home. And we get a shot, which I didn't notice this until now, but Catherine had tied the two twins up. They have ropes around their waist, and it's honestly to keep them corralled because she knows that it's hard to take care of these two twins. They're impossible. And she was yelling at Thomason for not being able to do it when she herself knows, hey, it's impossible. And this just proves that she has it out for her daughter, or it gives the idea that she is mad at her daughter when she knows that this is, hey, you have to tie them up. They're impossible. They're like when you go to Target and that mom who is just like carrying both kids on a leash. It's one of those moments. So then we get a scene where Thomason wakes up, she comes to, and she hears the sound of her father. And she runs to him, and Thomason and William reunite, and he's like, "What happened? What happened?" So then we cut inside. We see that Kate is arguing with Thomason and William about, where's Caleb? Where you're supposed to find Caleb. What are you doing? And during this arguing, William comes clean saying, I sold your cups to buy traps. We went into the woods because Thomason says, we went out there to get food. We needed food, so we went out and got it. This is the first time that William comes clean on, hey, I did something wrong. And the way he phrases it is really interesting. He says, I sold your cup. Forgive me. And then he turns to Thomas and says, forgive me, Thomason. Forgive me, Catherine. And it's important of how he says that. When he's praying to God, he says, please forgive me. He's begging. But when he says, forgive me, Catherine, forgive me, Thomason, he's commanding them that they forgive him. Because still his pride, he's so prideful that he's like, I'll admit to being wrong just to shut you guys up, but don't you dare say it's my fault. And it's another important thing, and just adds to this feeling of oppressiveness in his family. So while William and Catherine are fighting, we see that Thomason goes outside so she can put the animals up. Because Catherine's like, did you not lay the animals or bed the animals? And she says no. So she sends her out into the rain to go put up the sheep. And it's while she's in here that she hears something. And she finds Caleb has returned in the rain naked. She calls for help. So then we get a scene where Caleb is passed out, he's laying down, and Thomason and Catherine are taking care of him. They take a bowl to his head, they take a knife, and they bleed him. Because medicine sucked so bad that they thought that bleeding was the way to get the demons out of your blood, because they didn't understand hypothermia, didn't understand sickness. So they're doing that. But while this is going on, William goes outside and he's just chopping wood. He's not dealing with the situation that's been given to him. He's just going outside, he's chopping wood. He doesn't want to blame himself for what happened, so he just does something else. So we cut to the next day, and Mercy is talking to Black Phillip in the barn. She's going like, ba, 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 ba. She's whispering it into his ear. And Mercy then turns to Thomason and says, Black Phillip told me that you cursed Caleb. And they two get in an argument, saying, Black Phillip told me you're a witch. She's saying, I am not a witch. Stop doing this. So then Thomason turns to milk the goat named Flora. I think it's Flora. And when she milks her, blood comes out. So then we cut back inside, and Catherine is praying over Caleb. She is convinced that it's witchcraft. So then William tells Kate that they will return to the plantation, will get the doctor, and of course, with his pride, he says, but we can't go empty handed. We have to sell things. He will not accept people helping him. He's gonna make them pay for this service because his pride is way too big when people could be giving him help. And he needs to let that go to help his family. So then we cut to the family working outside there, chopping down corn, getting it ready, just getting stuff prepared to sell. We get Mercy singing about Black Phillip again. And this is when Thomason says, Mercy, please stop. I can't stand you singing. And then even Catherine says, please stop, Mercy. We don't like you singing. And while Mercy keeps singing, she gets interrupted by the screaming of Caleb. Caleb has come to. He's awake. He is having convulsions. Looks like he's seizing. His mouth won't open. Everyone runs upstairs. And when the two twins see Caleb convulsing, they drop to the floor and start shaking too. And even Thomason is like, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. And Catherine is turning to Thomason saying, what's happening? What are you doing? So while the kids are convulsing on the floor, the three awake, the William, Catherine, and Thomason, take hands and they begin to pray over Caleb. And Caleb sits up, closes his mouth. William tries to open his mouth, and Caleb spits out an apple. which is impossible how to get there. But this apple was bloody, it was rotten. Catherine is now convinced that this is definitely the sign of the witch, and everybody needs to pray. So she gets everybody down, they begin to say the Lord's Prayer, and the two twins are there as well. But as they're given the prayer, the two twins say, I've forgotten my prayer. And then they go on to say, Thomason's making me forget she's doing this, which is wrong. It's not true. But then this is when Catherine says, Thomason, stop. You're a witch. Like, stop doing this. And Thomason's pleading, I am not a witch. During this time, Caleb comes to and he begins to say the prayer. And everyone's like, oh, thank God. He's alive. He's talking. He's with God. And they start like, thank God. And then his tone begins to switch from talking about God to kind of talking about making love to God, and then switches the God character to a female character. We get a shot where it sees like Caleb has just been filled with this sense of love and ... And he starts to breathe heavily in this bliss, and he stops breathing, and he's dead. So as this happens, the two twins pass out. They fall to the floor, not moving. William grabs Thomason and drags her out of the house down the stairs and blames her, saying, you're a witch. Tell me you're a witch, and we can try and pray for you. And Thomason is like, I'm not a witch. This isn't my fault. This is your fault. Thomason says, if you would have baptized us, we wouldn't be home. Or if you would have gotten food like you're supposed to, he wouldn't have to go out. But instead, you're chopping wood. All you do is chop wood. You do nothing else. And during this time, William, once again being called out on his manhood and his pride, takes matters in his own hands. And he's trying to have Thomason say, I am a witch. So William becomes so convinced that she's a witch that he drags her back into the house and comes in, and we see that Catherine is preparing Caleb for burial. She's washing him and doing things like that. Catherine says, I don't want her in here. Get her out. And William says, say what you said. Tell her what you told me. Tell her that you're a witch. So they start fighting. And William says, I will take care of this. I will do what Abraham would have done to his son. And he says, fetch the bill hook. I will cast these sinners out of our house. They will plague us no more. So he picks up the boy and starts to shake him. And he starts to scream, proving that he was faking it. He was pretending to sleep, perhaps hysteria, which definitely is what it is. It's not like he had evil intent. He's just in hysteria, and he thought that he was paralyzed. So then William takes the three children and he puts them in the sheep shed with all the animals. He bars the door, or he blocks it with wood, and then you just see the crying of all the three of like, please don't do this to us. It's not safe out here. Please don't do that to us. And then it cuts silent. We see that William is about to bury Caleb. So then we get a shot of Thomason in the corral, in the stable, with Mercy and the other boy, the other twin, which I don't know why I can't remember his name. But the twins turn to Thomason and say, are you a witch? And Thomas says, no. Are you guys a witch? They say, no. The Thomason says, can you actually talk to Black Phillip, or talk to the goat? And they say, yes, he talks to us, he whispers to us, he tells us things. So then we jump to William chopping wood at night. Once again, just going back to this is how he deals with shit. He's chopping wood, and he begins to cry, and he begins to weep and pray to God, saying, trade my life for my children. They're cursed by the devil. Have him take me, spare my children. But intercut with this, we see Catherine, the mother, gets out of bed in the same fashion that the witch from earlier left her house, which would be like leg first, hair down. Catherine gets out of bed and she walks towards the end of the room, and in the background we see her silver cup is there. And then she hears a sound, she turns, and Caleb and Sam are back. Caleb is talking to his mother about, we're here, Mom. We require that you come with us. I've brought in a book. If you would just write your name. And Catherine says, yes, I will, but first, Sam is hungry. He must be fed. So then she takes Sam, and then we cut back in the night to the children in the barn, and we hear something large land on the roof with a loud thud, and everyone wakes up and they're scared. And we hear the creature walk across the roof, fall to the ground, and walk around. And Thomason is like looking around. She's scared. The twins are screaming. And then Thomason hears from the inside a goat bleat, and she turns and sees that this creature, this woman, is milking the goat or drinking milk or blood from the goat's teat. The woman turns around, and during this whole scene, the music is getting louder and louder and louder, giving a sense of terror. And the woman turns around and just in a older, creepy, like shining level woman in the bathtub lets out a laugh. And then we cut to the inside and we see that Catherine, the mother, is laughing hysterically as a crow. She's not nursing Sam, a baby. She's nursing a crow, and the crow is picking at her flesh. And she's just laughing hysterically through the whole time, having lost her mind. So then we get a scene the next morning where William wakes up. He rolls out of bed. He looks at his wife. We see that Catherine was awake. She's quiet. She has blood on her nightgown, so we know that all that happened. And he walks outside slowly. You can see on his face that he sees something. And as he's walking out, he sees that the barn is destroyed. The animals are mutilated out front, and the twins are gone. We don't know what happened to him. We see Thomason laying out front, and it's like she woke up the same time he does. And as they're looking at each other, Black Phillip, the goat, comes over and gores William in the stomach. He stabs him with his horn, and this is when William decides he's done. He's saying, "In by my father's word, I will rid this evil." And then the goat knocks him backwards, and the wood pile that he's been making by not dealing with his feelings crash on top of him and kill him instantly. It crushes him. So then we see that Thomason is just blank face staring. She does not know what to do. And Catherine comes out and hits her across the face and is screaming at her hysterically, saying, "This is your fault. This is your fault." And Catherine throws her to the ground and is just punching Thomason. And the whole time, Thomas saying, "It's not my fault. It's not my fault. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love my family. I love you." And she reaches over and she grabs something and she hits her mother with it. And then we see that Thomason has hit her mom with the bale hook, a knife. So then Catherine looks at her like, "I'm going to kill you." And she starts choking Thomason. And Thomason, in self defense, takes the knife and stabs her mother in the throat, killing her mom, covering her with blood. So Catherine keels over, and Thomason is just laying there for a second. And then she gets up, traumatized, not saying a word. Everything is silent, walks into the house. And as she's walking to the house, she begins to undress like, I have nothing. I am nothing. I've lost everything. So she's walking in, takes off her overcoat, leaving her in just like a nightgown, and she sits down on the table and just goes to sleep. She can't do anything. She doesn't know what to do. So then we cut later that night. It's dark outside. Thomason comes to, and she's looking around. She's seeing nothing. And then we hear Black Phillip just like in the room. And then Thomason walks over to Black Phillip and says, "Black Phillip, I conjure thee to speak to me. Speak as thou dost speak to Jonas and Mercy. Dost thou understand my English tongue? Answer me."
What dost thou want?
And then Thomason says, "What canst thou give?"
Wouldn't thou like to taste of butter or a pretty dress? Wouldn't thou like to live deliciously?
"Yes."
Wouldn't thou like to see the world?
"What will you from me?"
Dost thou see a book before thee? Remove thy shift.
"I cannot write my name."
I will guide thy hand.
And it's implied that Thomason, when nothing else was presented to her, signs her name to Black Phillip, condemning her to be a witch. And at this point, she's forced to become what everyone is telling her, which is not in a girl boss way, but more of a you have made me be this thing. You have made me become of what I am not. And she gives in and she does what it takes for her to survive and becomes this witch. So then we see the next scene of just Thomason walking through the woods, and we see that she's naked. We can only see her from behind, and she's like following Black Phillip, this goat, into the woods. And then this is these shots of Thomason walking through the woods as Black Phillip leads her, and the music's going during this time. It's creating just this like all the sound, like the music has come to the chorus, come to the crescendo, come to the biggest part of it. It's all the music is alive. The music is finally there. It's like the music is the woods and she is the woods. That's the best way I can describe it. But then we see that Thomason walks up and there's a group of women dancing. They're dancing naked in the woods around the fire. They're writhing on the ground. They're being low. And when she enters the fold, the women all slowly get up from a crouched position and they begin to dance and they begin to shake until they begin to rise into the air. And then we get a reverse shot of Thomason just seeing all this. And she begins to laugh, not like a happy laugh, but like a winning laugh of finally I'm free, finally this. And she too begins to rise into the woods. And that's the movie. So, like I said, talking about this gives this movie no justice. I hope that you guys are able to watch this movie, listen to the audio of how everything is spoken, listen to the music, watch the darkness that is around this family literally at night, the fear of the woods, because it this is the best way to show it. They can't see something and neither can you. Everything is the word for that's like diegetic. The everything we see is diegetic. We're not able to see things that they aren't. Everything we see comes from the perspective of our characters, and we know things as they know things. But it's this whole movie is beautiful. It's so much. It is so worth the watch, and I hope that you guys will watch this. So after this, Robert Eggers goes on to make another movie that sure I hope that you guys have seen. It's The Lighthouse with Robert Pattinson and William Dafoe. And that movie, if you know about it, it's in black and white. So this has a sense of mise-en-sens, which is this idea in film that you get parts of the idea or the message of the movie in how it's displayed. So in The Lighthouse, everything's in black and white. So we know that this is like a storybook. It is not realistic. It's like you're reading a fantasy. And in this one, having everything be period accurate puts you in the shoes of this is real. This happened and this still happens, and it's just a way to discuss this. I wanted to talk about some things that stuck out to me while I was watching this. So, in history, one theory to why the witchcraft and the witch trials happened comes from this mold called ergot. I think it's ergot, which was this mold that infected the crops of the day and would cause hallucinations. It'd make people sick. So historians do believe that that mixed in with the social powers that were derived during the trials caused the Salem witch trials. And another thing that happens during this time, which happens still to this day, is the sense of mass hysteria. Um, while the kids are sleeping or in quotes sleeping, it's not like they're pretending or they're evil, but they're stricken with fear so much they're paralyzed. And this happens a lot. In history, there's been plenty of cases of mass hysteria, like in I think here in the States in like the 1700s, there was this person who started dancing in the middle of the street, and people were so like scared that they started dancing. And all these people started doing this one act of dancing nonstop, not drinking, not eating, to where they called in a Catholic church or they called in a Catholic priest and they exorcised everybody saying, stop doing this, it's the devil, because they thought the devil was moving them when really it was just, I started dancing, you started dancing, I don't want to stop because you don't want to stop. Kind of like when you're playing catch with somebody and you're at the point eventually where you throw the ball and they catch it, but you're done, you want to stop, but instead they throw the ball back and you catch it and they also want to stop. But the idea of saying, hey, let's stop and ending someone else's joy or fun or going against the mold is the part that you don't want to do. So it's just you both back and forth catching and throwing this ball until eventually someone does. I know it's a really weird way to say it, but that's one of the best ways I could describe that. Off the top of my head, another example of this happening is at a nunnery or a convent in Argentina, I think, in the early 20s. There is a nun who bit another nun for fun out of a joke, but she then played that same joke of biting somebody for laughs on another nun, and they all started doing it until they started biting each other over and over and over again, to where it became like kind of violent, and they had to call in a priest to exorcise everybody because they thought that this demon had entered them and was making them bite each other, when really it's just people being people and people are dumb. So now is the time of the podcast where we describe what we would have done in that situation. And for this, I'm going to propose a hypothetical that myself and my family, and for you would be your family, and perhaps it's the same family if you're like my mother listening to this. But say that I and my family was cast out into this woods and we were attacked by this being. Do I think that I would survive? Would be able to fight off the temptation of the woods and the temptation of Satan and the witch? I don't think so. I I don't know. Have it be loneliness and just being in that oppressive situation with your family. I see this as possible. I think that the deaths in this movie are well earned, and really nothing even down to William and Catherine's death could have been preventable, because Black Phillip gored him when he wasn't noticing, when he was already lost. He had given up. So maybe he didn't see him, or maybe he did see him. We don't know. But then Catherine, too, being so lost in her hysteria and her sadness and her grief that she attacks her daughter, and then Thomason killing her. I think it's possible. And if I was applied to that, I think it'd be the same outcome. So for this movie, I gotta say, it's impossible to survive the haunt unless you live deliciously with Black Phillip. Which I've always loved that whole phrase, live deliciously, or how he says it.
Live deliciously.
To where if I was to get a tattoo, I've always thought about this. I'm probably not gonna ever get tattoos because I want to be an actor, or I want to work in film, and part of working in film might be acting it sometimes. So maybe having tattoos might deter people from hiring me for a job. So unless or until the time that I give up, or I am able to have tattoos and have a job, probably not going to have any. But I so badly love the picture of, or a tattoo of Black Phillip on his hind legs with live deliciously underneath, because even that term, have it be derived of live in sin, of living deliciously, tasting butter, of tasting these things that everyone else holds for granted, that if you do this, you get everything you deserve or everything you think you deserve. I understand that. I I get it. I 100% understand why somebody like Thomason, who is at the end of everything, her family's betrayed her, she doesn't feel loved, and then she loses everybody, would give in and take somebody up on the offer of, I will take care of you and you can get everything you want. And this is off topic and this doesn't really apply to here, but this is how cults work. Um, a sociopath or somebody who wants to hurt other people will go out of their way to find someone hurting and knows that they're hurting, and will offer them, hey, I'll make sure all that hurt goes away. And in doing so, they give everything and they'll do anything for them. And it's because, not because these people are dumb, but it's because they're hurting and they need help. And when someone shows them kindness, or the idea of what they have to do in return of their safety, they'll take up the offer. Thomason will write her name in the book if it means that she can be free, and she cannot carry this guilt of being a human. And just in like regular life, this is how Jim Jones of Jonestown got these people. These people were disenfranchised. They're disproportionately worse off, and he would pay their rent. He'd be like, "Hey, I have this church. I'll pay your rent for you. I know it's hard to be a woman. It's hard to struggle. It's hard to be you. Let me help you." And these people, when they're given this love for the first time, went all in, and he corrupted them and he hurt them, and because he knew that they were hurting. This is how people convince people to do these things, these monstrous things, and it's how it's so important to be there for somebody and not judge somebody. Even Caleb being guilty of looking at his sister's blouse when it was open, because he's a human, he's a kid. He doesn't know why, he doesn't have the words for it, but it's in human nature for him to seek after that. He's going through puberty, and eventually he will want to be married and he'll want to start a family. And since he was put in a situation where he was left all alone, the only outcome, the only source of anything like that he can get human interaction is from his family, and he's stricken with guilt and he's fearful. And I think that's what adds to him to his death. This kid will do anything for his family and he loves them, but he's scared. He's a kid, he's a boy, and it shouldn't be his job. It should be William's. But William, in his pride, won't do anything to help him. He'll stay righteous in his own mind, knowing that it's hurting his family. And even Catherine, in that too, looks at what she has and is jealous of Thomason, of just being this woman, being herself, and is angry with William for causing him, or for William to send them out. And no one stands up for each other. No one does anything just because it's oppressive. And it's the time where women didn't have, and they still, for the most part, don't. Women didn't have this social cash, and the only thing they were worth was to be sold for something else. And Thomason doesn't want that life. And she doesn't deserve to be an object to somebody else. She deserves to be her. And that's why she signs her name and she lives deliciously. So I want to thank everybody for listening. I know uh this podcast doesn't not give this movie any justice, and I really, 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 really implore you guys to watch it and have the idea of, don't look at her as being stupid for becoming a pseudo witch. Look at this innocent, scared girl be made enemy by her family. Just keep that in mind while watching. I will continue to watch this movie. This, to me, if I was to rank this, it is a 10. This is my 10. This is one of my comfort movies that scares me. It really does. And it doesn't rely on enter loud noise or enter scary monster. It's just this sense of sadness, and the compassion that I have for this individual just stays with me. So no, this episode's a little heavier, so I'm going to lighten it up. I I'm excited to watch this. I've not seen this movie since I was maybe in the 8th grade, but next week we are doing Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I know, I can't believe it either. You can rent the movie on YouTube. That's probably how I'm going to do it. I always employ or implore people to pay for cinema. Don't just steal it. Don't just watch it online. If you can't afford it, then do that. But go to the movies. Be in Pay these people. If you enjoyed it, this is somebody's job. And go watch this in the theaters, cuz even this movie, if I am in Lawrence and I see that they're showing The Witch, I will be there. And I'm bringing my friends because I want to pay people for me to watch this in the theaters. So next week we're watching, once again, like I just said, we'll be watching and discussing Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Something that's funny, it's action horror, came from 2012. I think everyone kind of knows of it. It was is like really shitty and fun. So we should have a really good time. You can rent it on YouTube, and I just want to thank everybody so much for listening. I'm feel better this week than I did last week. I can't wait to see what this becomes. Um, I've been working in the background for of ideas to make some visual content for you guys. I can give a little sneak peek. I grew up with my mom renting my brother and I Goosebumps or reading the Goosebumps books. And I really want to talk about those and the importance of how they were in my childhood, but then just what the impact that they had on young people in general. So that's something to look forward to. More information will come out as I find it. But thank you so much for listening. You can follow me on Instagram at Survive the Haunt. For this for this episode, I'm for every episode I make a post on Instagram, and that is a place where you can anything that I've said about it, about the film. If you want to have a conversation, feel free to drop a comment in there, and we can talk. And just thank you so much. Share this with your friends. If you enjoyed it, share it to somebody else. And even if you don't enjoy it, thank you for listening. Your 3 seconds of listening helps me. And even if there's something that you don't like, tell me. I want this to be for other people. I'm making this for me, but I want to give this to other people. So give me feedback. I will take it. I will happily discuss. Even if we argue in the comments, let me know. I will love to hear what you have to say about it. So once again, you can follow me at Survive the Haunt on Instagram. Um, there will also give you sneak peeks about what's happening. There's inside look at my life, and just thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.
This has been Survive the Haunt.